Will Galloway, Spinners of Yarns podcast with Steve Drewett of the Newtown Neurotics. How are you, Steve?
I'm fine. Good to see you again.
Likewise. Start the podcast at the beginning. Where of your life? Where were you born?
Islington.
Islington.
Actually, I was born. I can't remember the name of the hospital around there now, but the major hospital, the nearest major hospital in that area, and I discovered after the fact, really, that for the first 5 years of my life, I lived sort of a block or two away from John Lydon.
Okay.
Who grew up in exactly the same area. The only difference between the two of us is we come from the same area, but I ended up moving with my family to Harlow, Newtown, and he continued to live in the sort of Islington area. So I just read one of his books and and through that realised where he was, and I thought, yeah. If I had stayed there, we might have even crossed paths later on. But I was destined to be moving out to the Newtown experiment, and he continued there. So that's where I'm from initially.
So
5 years.
When did so you moved to Harlow when you was 5?
Yeah, it was. We were moved there because my mum worked for Costas Electronics, and the powers that be had offered a sort of an encouragement for Costas to move their North London factory into Harlow, and also the people that they wanted to move to work there as well from there, had the added incentive that they would get a brand new home. And as it happens, just before that was offered to the people who worked at Costas, we were about to be evicted. So I don't know all the ins and outs about that, but basically our life was going to be thrown up in the air because we'd settled there for quite a while. I don't think that that eviction was going on, or people being moved out of a landlord's property was going on with the sort of churn rate that you have these days. But we got settled into that part of London, and it looked like we was going to have to find somewhere else to live. And I don't know how difficult that would or wouldn't have been, but just at that point in time, Costas Electronics said that that they were moving the factory to Harlow, and that there will be transport laid on from outside the factory to go to Harlow and take a tour around the town and see the sort of housing that they would get, brand new housing.
Yeah.
So that was quite a bizarre thing. I don't remember it, but I've seen pictures of it, and it's Green Line coaches, 718. A coach that were forever connected Harlow as a lifeline through to back to London. People who moved to Harlow didn't really have cars, so the 718 and the 724 were two Green Line coaches that connected us back to my parents' old life, and they caught those to go back into London, see their relatives and that, and visit from time to time, and then come back out to Harlow. It's quite a distance to cover when you don't. The majority of the people who moved there didn't have cars. Yeah. It's quite a long distance, but so these streets were brand new, and a lot of them didn't have anybody living in them. They'd just been constructed, so you'd be sitting on this coach going through these completely brand new streets, eerie and empty and eerie like, and then you would all get off at certain point and be shown round the sort of buildings and architecture that was being put in place into this new town. And the way that the houses were built and placed was radically different from what people are used to in London.
Yeah.
A lot of green space around each of the housing estates. So it's sort of for many of the people who took that trip to think about moving with Costa, it was very much like being moved into the countryside, almost like really moving into the countryside. Whereas a lot of the town still hadn't been built, and it was never planned to be just idyllic. It was meant to move a lot of people into that area, and a lot of buildings still needed to be taking place. But built into this concept of the new town was to have lots of open spaces, cycle tracks, trying to avoid the close conurbations that happen in London, and was trying to make sports and fresh air and exercise a lot easier thing for people to enjoy, because once you live there, they're cost free. And so it's a cycle track, it doesn't cost you anything to cycle round or to walk. Your children can grow up quite often in pedestrianised parts of the town. That was one of the new approaches, and because there wasn't a lot of people there, and car ownership was so low, it was really, really safe for the kids to just play around. And I spent a lot of my formative years, the early years, living in a brand new house right next to the road, and me and my friends would all play in the road all day. Yeah, because occasionally a car would come around the corner, you step off the road and onto the pavement, it passed, and then you carried on playing. Or playing in the actual road. That road now, you have trouble finding a moment when you can cross.
Yeah.
There's so much traffic going up and down there now. But when we first moved there, it was just like the roads were like rivers of concrete. They just went off into the distance with hardly anything moving on them. So yeah, my family decided, well, we haven't got a house, we're being evicted, this is perfect. Yeah. So regardless of maybe any downside to it, we all moved there and then crossed their fingers and hoped for the best. I mean, it was quite a difficult environment right at the beginning, and we had a sort of problem. There were problems within the family that were exacerbated, I think, by being in Harlow, because normally my sisters, who are older than me, who couldn't stand, we were dysfunctional, right? The family was just, it brought its dysfunction out of London and into Harlow, whereas my sisters who are older than me would have enough and just walk out the door and have London at their feet to do whatever they wanted. Yeah. Now when they walk out, there's nothing. Yeah. There's no support network. You don't know anybody. There's no clubs or anything to join. You've got nowhere to go. So one of my sisters walked out the door and then would be gone days, because she'd go and stay with her friends in London. Yeah. She couldn't bear it. Yeah. You know, and there were a number of other families that moved out of London and into Harlow at that time that had these similar sorts of problems, feelings of alienation. You know, it was fairly traditional hierarchy within families in those days, and the young mothers, mostly young families, moved out to there. They would, the man would go off to work during the day in Harlow, because the idea was for the most part, they would make sure that there was work in the town for people who moved out there. So all the people that started living there to begin with were connected to companies that moved to Harlow. So the father would go out to work, and then the wife would be left indoors with one or two or whatever children, and no support network. day after day after day, and there was nowhere to go, and what shops there were miles away, because construction was going on all around them. There was noise and mud being traipsed into the house and things going on outside the house, making people within the home get startled and wonder what's going on. So it's quite a weird experience. And in the evening there is just television, and that was it. One or two pubs, but not many to begin with. So it was pretty damn weird. And a lot of people who come out and tried Harlow for a while went back, and there was a sort of media interest at the time, and a phrase was called Newtown Blues, where people just couldn't adjust to living out there, because it wasn't being moved out to an established new town where here it is. This is the alternative to London. There's a transitory period in which at one point there was very little of the Newtown experience for people to experience themselves, apart from isolation and alienation. Not good things. And it's part of that sort of background that I grew up in as a child, which would eventually see itself manifest in the name of the band, Newtown Neurotics. It had a lot of weight behind the name, because it sort of, I can't remember the definitive moment, but I look at the name that I chose for the band and look at my upbringing, and I think 2 is 4. I mean, it's obvious. I don't remember how I thought I'm going to be called in the band Newtown Neurotics, but really it's everything that I was as I grew up. And as I, after the name was established, I sort of had times when I thought, was this right? I mean, to be honest, John Peel didn't like our name. He liked the band a lot, but he took exception to the name, and that made me think, well, maybe you should change it. But because my roots were in the neurosis that I saw prevalent within our early days in the town, and for other people as well, I thought it perfectly matched the environment that I'm coming out of. You could choose any number of really clever names if you wanted to, but for me, I based everything on everything I tried to do was I tried to make it as free of bullshit as I could possibly do, meaning no airs and graces, no over exaggerating the importance of me or anyone else, but just say this is what I do, this is what we're called, and it's based on this. Something grounded, something honest, that I could then be creative over, within that construct. So we changed our name once. Funnily enough, after saying all of that, everyone called us the Neurotics after a few years, and we musically we the emphasis of what we were creating sounded quite a lot different from our first album, so we decided it might be an idea to trim our name down to the Neurotics. Everyone called us the Neurotics, so that seemed like a perfectly reasonable thing to do. And the first album was talking about the Newtown experience. The second album was talking about more national experience, and then as we went on, about global experiences. So it's coming further and further away from the initial thing. So at that point I thought, well, it'd be good to just call us the Neurotics. It spans any type of neurotic reaction to things that you feel are wrong, and that proved to be a really, really bad thing to do, as it turned out, because this was before the days of Google, internet, mobile communications, or any of that sort of thing. We were dealing with magazines, fanzines, and that was it really. And the distribution of our records was was not quite as global as it is now, but it was going over to America and Europe and things. When our second album came out with just the Neurotics on, no people didn't understand it was the same band.
Yeah.
So for many, many years, people thought that the only album the Neurotics ever released was Beggars Can Be Choosers, because they had no other information to tell them otherwise, and the name change just was a split that cut us off from the thread, the historical thread that we were going through, the thread which said they were this and now they're that. It just severed it.
But it all kind of changed as well. You know, music changed in 83, 84.
Yeah.
You know, kind of like a lot of punk bands broke up or changed the direction musically in certainly 83 and 84 if you have a look at certain album outputs, you know. So I suppose you had to do something to adapt to.
We were changing. We weren't going in the direction of other people because we were almost felt allergic to it. I mean, we're new romanticism or any of that is sort of, I would rather die than actually make an album that was a new romantic album. Yeah. I a lot of the pop trends in the 80s, I really despise. I can't stand listening to it. That isn't to say that I've got a narrow appreciation of music. In fact, it's so wide. It is. Most people would be surprised, but that particular vein of pop doesn't sound any better today than it did then. I know some people really think it's great the 80s, relive the 80s and that music, but to me, it's disingenuous. It's twee. It's awkward and uncomfortable to listen to, and the instrumentation, the emergence of cheap synthesizers and things like that, didn't put the thrill in me that it did for a lot of people who thought this was a way to express yourself. I mean, the idea of a way of expressing yourself without being a musician. I sort of have a part of me that appreciates that, especially if you're doing experimental music. And that makes perfect sense. But actually, the pop that was made with it seemed soulless to me. I couldn't connect with it. And I think, you know, in a way, it's this is where taste comes from. There's an inner part of you that would respond to one thing more than another. Yeah. And that I responded to the punk really well, and I really enjoyed the feedback it gave me, and I was involved in creating it from not being able to play an instrument at all. So that is very important to me. But I just felt that I could express my innermost feelings, and it would be, even though it's not soul music, I was expressing something through my soul. Soul was really an important word in the non-musical genre way, and I found 80s music to be pretty soulless. Yeah. So there's no way I was going to put my guitar down and start getting a synthesizer or doing anything like that. So that went off that direction, and I'm not considering what or what stepping stones I need to do to become famous. I'm not interested in that at all. All I'm interested in, having found from being a non-musician to being able to create something that expresses the way I feel, sometimes, well, a lot better than I can express myself through words, because I'm dyslexic, and I have a tendency for ideas to rush too fast through my head, and sometimes I can't express them as I would like to hear them. I mean, I get my ideas across, and people say, yeah, that's fine, but to me, I have good days and bad days, and some days I cannot really express the feelings I'm feeling and trying to relay about a particular subject. But music, that's not done in a rush. You know, for me, that's considered, and I always need a line to say more than just its one line, or it has to have something interesting through that line. If I could say it one way and it's just sort of said in a very uninteresting but direct way, sometimes it works, but for me I like to have something more interesting in it. And there were times in the early days when people equated punk music to have lyrics that had to be direct and had to be so simplistic that you'd look at the lyrics and think, really? Well, I would anyway. Really? I mean, I did have a background of liking lyrics that actually said, you discovered it over time, and you discovered new depths in the lyrics and the music over the years. And I was trying to create something that wouldn't just go, oh yeah, I really like that, and then that's it. I wanted it to be each song to have texture and nuance and interesting ways of describing the ideas that I'm trying to put out. So I had a couple of interesting conversations with people who were of the impression that to write something that isn't really simplistic in punk means that for some reason I'm not punk. It's sort of like you're being far too clever, or being you're striving to be pseudo intellectual, whereas something very direct is more honest. I get that point. I do get that point, but I think that that for me that wasn't what I was aiming to do. Right. I was trying to express my life in ways that I've always had this weird thing that I wanted it to be interesting years later. Instead of focusing on the now, only in the now, I was focused on what was happening to me in the now, but I wanted to put it into a series of songs that created a mosaic of different images and ideas to express what I was putting across. So I think to a certain extent, the way that music changed at that point in time, I didn't think I could be doing that with that. So the Neurotics changed, but in a different way. And we the second album sounds so much. The repercussions, the second album. Oh, incidentally, the problem with the name change is that everyone bought the first album and didn't think there was any other albums by us to buy. And the Neurotics albums that are called just the Neurotics got sort of like left in the background with only a small amount of people actually knew, oh, that's Newtown Neurotics. Nowadays, it wouldn't be a problem. You Google, you can find out on Google or whatever. If you think that if you're looking at somewhere and there's Neurotics and Newtown Neurotics, are they the same? You do a search, you'll find out it is. But then it was a problem. So we changed our name and the music, reflecting the times. And this is the thing, you write as you are. So when we sat down to do our latest album, Cognitive Dissidence, we said, what are we doing? What should we be aiming for? Where is the focus? Well, after so many years of not doing an album of any sort, what are we doing now? Well, lyrically, it wasn't a problem because there was all sorts of craziness going on during that period, of which there was plenty of things to work into the album lyrically that could, in fact, it was too much. It was a bit hard to actually pick a certain amount of this craziness to reflect on, and we had to leave some of it out because it would take quite a few more songs to take everything into account, what had been going on over the years and these current few years. But we decided that we would do what we needed to do is to do something that was lyrically spoke of the times, musically would be interesting and keep your attention.
Yeah.
And if we wanted to put Hammond organ on it, although we don't have that in our lives, live set, we're still a free piece, we'd do it anyway. We'd do whatever we needed to do to try and make an album of this time. What we weren't trying to do is to try and pick up where we left off after Beggars Can Be Choosers or any of the other albums. So you've got people who, when they hear that Neurotics have got a new album out, they'd be thinking about, does it sound like Beggars? God, I'd really, if it's like Beggars, I'd really love that. I'll go and buy that. Or someone might be saying, are they picking up where they left off? Well, after Is Your Wash and Bring Bolsheviks album, because that'd be really good. Well, we weren't taking that into account. The one thing that needs to be taken into account is that we've had one person die from the original lineup, and there's been 30 years in between two albums.
Yeah.
You've got to take into account that we're going to be different.
Yeah.
And it would be weird if we weren't.
Yeah.
And we haven't got the strength and the stamina we had of early days. So it was sometimes when the reviews come out of Cognitive Dissonance, most of the reviews were fantastic. But it was really irritating that some people, well, not some people, quite a lot of people, although they liked the album, immediately spoke of Beggars Can Be Choosers and nothing in between.
Yeah.
As though somewhere along the line, they've done a quick recce of the band. They've got this thing to review. They've done a quick recce of the band. And of course, the other two albums are still getting lost because because of the classification, the way it's all been drawn in for it's a streaming service.
Yeah.
What is it? The major one?
Spotify.
The Spotify algorithms have had trouble with the two albums. So you don't immediately get a link when you listen to one.
Yeah.
If you like this, you'll like this. It doesn't. There are various parts of the internet do not make that connection even now.
Because they tried to get where we were yesterday, Kick Out the Tories on Spotify, but they couldn't get it. You couldn't get it to play.
Well, it should be that's easy.
It was there, but it couldn't play.
Oh right. Well, the single songs. If you go Newtown Neurotics, Kick Out the Tories, you'll get them all if you want them. But if you play something, I can't remember which way round it goes. Whether you play the older album, it goes and reflect back that there is some mismatch. We've had a word with our record labels who have handled these things, and it's sort of in the algorithm and very hard to get right, put it right. Basically, they don't see one another. The connections aren't made. The disconnection that we found from the 80s is still built in.
Yeah.
By the nature of the name is different, So there's that. But there were some people who actually. Sort of said, well, Steve's not the same, or the band's not the same as their first album. Their first album, give us a break. How could we ever be? Yeah. I mean, actually, if we had sort of some artificial intelligence involved with it, then maybe they could produce an album that sounds like us.
Yeah, of course.
Back in,
they wouldn't need
the day. Yeah, exactly. But we come with all our quirks.
Yeah.
And whatever they may be, and what we're doing, I hate I'm not trying to sort of use a terminology like mature rock because I'd hate to be that, but nonetheless, we're maturer than when we first started out, and that would reflect in the music to some degree. But we're angry. That hasn't changed. The only difference is the years that have gone by.
So, because we've jumped quite a lot.
We have, haven't we?
You've moved.
I've
to
done
Harlow.
the same thing I'm moaning about.
I've been waiting to the point where I could point you back. So you moved to Harlow. When did music become of interest to you? And which bands?
The music. Well, when I was a kid, I heard what my sisters listened to, come across the transistor radio. My parents were absolutely non-musical, so there's nothing I picked out from them. But my sisters were listening to music, and then one of the first things I was bought, obviously my parents must have picked up on the fact that I was singing along with songs on the radio or something. They bought me a record player, and a little dance set sort of thing. And my uncle was a music fan, and he lent me a whole stack of singles, because once they could afford the record player but not the records. I really stretched their budget just for that. So they got my uncle to release to lend a load of his records to me. And he was a bit of an unusual guy. I can't remember exactly how it all come about, but he was he got a hi-fi in his home before anyone else had them. Those bits of furniture they used to have, and when you see all these James Last in stereo albums still knocking around all these days in charity shops, they were the sort of things you played on them. But he wasn't like that. He somewhere on the line picked up on ska, and he was maybe he was a bit of a skinhead in the old days. I can't remember, but he really, out of all the people that I knew in my family, he was the only one who was switched on enough and had loads and loads of ska records. So he lent me a lot of them, and they were great. And my parents then eventually managed to buy me a couple of Beatles singles, and I really loved that. So this was a time when the Beatles were maybe their second album or something like that. So from that point on, I was plugged into every new release they put out. Yeah. So, I remember a time when I was listening to the Beatles when there was no Sgt. Pepper, there was no White Album, none of those things had been created. So, I'm one of those people, one of those parts of their audience where they presented themselves as being one thing and still managed to interest me as they changed. Yeah. And took me along, whereas a lot of other people said, they're weirdos now. I'm not interested in what they play now. Oh no, give me the old stuff. I went along with the changes. It's the same sort of radical, creative mutational path that Bowie would later do. Who would be one thing at one moment, and you never knew what it was going to be like as it went on. And you'd follow those people, even though, and this is the thing, you'd follow them even though they made music that was now different from the album that encouraged you to buy the new one. Yeah. I love that album. And then you get the new one, I go, it's nothing like it. Oh, I don't know about this either. And then you go, oh, hang on a minute, I'm getting it now. After a few plays, and you go, I love this. That sort of journey. That's what I had. Yeah. And then I got involved with the counterculture, the hippie counterculture, and then at that point, music just went bang in all directions, all over the place. And then it wasn't a matter of I only like this, or I only like that. It was like I like lots of different things. That's abstract. I like that. That's soul. I like that. That's blue beat. I like that. I like all these things, and I continued that way for quite a while until that sort of freshness expired, really, and it started becoming progressive rock and self-indulgent claptrap, and that's when I disconnected from it deliberately. I'd found reggae, and I thought I'm leaving that lot behind because that's not doing anything for me now. Yeah. And I went and started getting heavily into reggae, and that dovetailed into punk. So it was a perfect path for me. Over the 70s, a lot of the bands that I went to see become mega famous, and then they weren't that interesting anymore. But I saw them early on, and it was fantastic. But all these things were sparking off in different directions going on, and that when it become progressive rock, it sort of like was getting really dreary. But reggae was really fresh.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, before that could get tired, punk slotted into it, and I thought that's for me as well, because that has done exactly what I'd like to find, that something has come in and invigorated each other, and then things have spun on for that. So I followed that then, and at that point, for a while, I was really only interested in 45s, not albums.
Yeah, yeah.
That seemed to be the immediacy of all of that.
Yeah.
And I kept with that sort of viewpoint for a few years, and then my mind started drifting again into different things. But but you know, the difference between the other music before and the music later on was that the punk part of it was when I learned to be able to contribute a bit of music and a few ideas to the world of music myself.
Yeah.
I never really, I'd already added early on, bought a guitar and had guitar lessons and couldn't get on with it and given up.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and I had a guitar under the bed, and a vow never to go to guitar lessons again. Too much like school, I can't be dealing with that.
Yeah.
Punk come along and said, don't bother about learning before you step on stage.
Yeah.
Get on stage and learn while you're doing it.
Yeah.
That was the thing that I loved about punk, and it changed me into a different person.
Yeah.
This is the thing. Looking back over the years now, I can see where the crossroads were for me, and I dread to think what I would have become if I hadn't been there at that point in time, because it has enriched me more than I can ever express. I mean, it's difficult to express it, but I do see other people say the same thing on many occasions. Music is a great motivator and a great inspiration. It's all to do with how human we are.
Yeah.
And I struggle sometimes to think of my mum and dad, who had gone through the Second World War and never really had anything that they would embrace and bring into our new house in a new town.
Yeah.
There was nothing that come from London that we had, and anything that was bought once we got there, and you know, it was pretty mainstream from mum and dad. Never spoke of going to a gig. Oh, and this is the thing, right? This is the important thing. I got through the entire Beatles career without knowing that you could go and see them.
Okay.
Although obviously girls did in the early days of the screen.
Yeah.
But that was a different life to me. Where was that? That was I don't know how far away that was. Never occurred to me, because I was in a new town. There was no venues, right? Yeah. I didn't get the crossover where you go and see a band for the first time in your life and go, wow, do you know what? I wouldn't mind doing that. Yeah. To me, instruments were played somewhere else. I heard it through the radio. I heard it through records. Didn't know what they looked like. Yeah. Didn't know about amplifiers. Yeah. Didn't know anything about that, and I didn't have somewhere in Harlow to go to experience it. Yeah. And I think the first band I ever saw was in Bishop Stortford, because we, you know, in the early days, because there was nowhere in Harlow. No, there was a couple of things put on in Harlow, but there was so few that I missed it. It went past me. I didn't hear about it. Yeah. So it took me a long time to actually realise these are not done by demigods, music. They're done by ordinary people who enjoy music, pick up an instrument, learn to play it, and then they pass on their skills as entertainment to people. That was when punk really put that I tried before, it didn't work, and the reason why it didn't work because I was cowed by people who thought that you had to be able to play "Stairway to Heaven" by Led Zeppelin before you could stand on the stage and not be laughed off of it.
Yeah.
Punk changed that, and then I took my guitar and my lack of dexterity, and together we made something. Yeah. And that's what music's about. It's not about how complex it is, how much dexterity goes into it. For me, it's always been one thing one thing only, and that is to make something that people enjoy listening to, and it gets them there. Yeah. I mean, to be able to actually put ideas and vibrations out through the air to someone you've never met before, and to move them, that is some wicked magic. Yeah. I mean, that is real magic. Yeah. And that's what, that when I look back at, the years that I've been playing, that's been the motivator since then. This really magical idea that you can communicate in a non-verbal way to people, and they feel emotion. It's not like describing a scene and someone gets a picture in their head. It actually moves them. Yeah. And that's what I search for in any music that I listen to, no matter where it comes from. If I can find the emotional core of it, I'm in. Yeah. That's what I couldn't do with 80s pop. It didn't do it. So yeah, that was the thing. I mean, when I found out that I liked more than you could like more than one thing, and they all fit together in your psyche without a problem, or your taste, as it's known. It doesn't matter if other people don't like it. You found that core part of it in music, and you followed that, and that's what you like. And I don't spend or expend energy in as much as possible. Although it's tempting to rubbish people's musical taste. That's what they like. Subjective. That's fine. Yeah. I mean, it can be quite fun to actually say, "Oh, why the hell are you listening to that?" You can make fun of people, but actually, there's a good reason why they like that. And when you look at what your own tastes are, you can see how other people feel about that. And actually, when I first got involved with punk, I look back on my musical taste beforehand. Yeah. And had a feeling of I felt foolish, and I felt embarrassed by some of the choices that I'd made beforehand. They weren't bad choices, but at that point in time, it felt like it. Of course. So I left them all behind, and then focused on reggae, Ramones, this sort of stuff, and then moved forward. Yeah. Later on, when I wanted to look back, I got this vinyl at home. I never got rid of a single record. Yeah. And I come back and started pulling them out and started playing again. Got a decent record deck. Just as vinyl was dwindling in popularity, that's when I got my record deck, ahead of the wave of the current fascination with vinyl at the moment. And I started playing the stuff that I went back to what I used to listen to, and I thought, there's room in me for that still. That has, I could see I can see where that thread that goes through other musical genres and where it's come from, the history of each musical format mutated, and I could see things in hippy drippy stuff like gong that goes right back to the early jazz days and things like that, and it's like a web of discovery. And of course, there was loads of pools of ignorance that I had through all of those different forms of music. I just got the top level of it. Like, no, I don't like that. Yeah, I like that. No, I don't like that. Don't like that. No, that sort of thing. And then when I went back and realised where the social fabric that's woven around how one music changed into the next, who was carrying it forward, who was like dying before they could make any more music and stuff like that. The history of it all I've just found fascinating. So I went back to all of the stuff that I liked before and embraced it once again, and then started looking around, seeing what else have I missed. as well as keeping an ear open for new music as well, of course, which you should always do.
So you the Newtown Neurotics, when did they come about? The first single was in '79, but you obviously formed in advance of the single.
I can tell you the exact time.
Yeah.
I can tell you it exactly. It was the night of the Ramones New Year's Eve gig, 77, 78.
Okay. Which one was that? Was that?
It's the Rainbow.
Oh, the Rainbow.
Rainbow.
Okay.
Because the Roundhouse was 76.
Right,
and
yeah.
I hadn't really... See, when punk happened, I thought it was really important to create a local scene.
Yeah.
And refused to go and see the big bands initially.
Yeah.
So I didn't get to see the Pistols, the Clash, the Ramones, or any of those to begin with.
Yeah.
And then I started thinking, actually, what you're talking about, it sort of makes sense. Like it's a punk thing to create a local scene, but also it can be viewed as being very parochial.
Yeah.
And you should go and see the people that originally inspired you. So then I started going to see them. So the Ramones, on that night, New Year's Eve, 1977, saying goodbye. What a tumultuous year. Saying goodbye to 77 and saying hello to 78 with the Ramones. And I went in. The Newtown Neurotics didn't exist when we walked in, and when we walked out, it did.
Yeah.
Almost. I'm squashing the timeline together a little bit because it was on the way home from the gig that I turned around to my mate, Colin Dredd, and I said to him, do you fancy forming a band together? And that was directly on the journey home from the Ramones gig, and on that night. And so that evening was when he said yes.
Yeah.
And we set about trying to find a drummer and kick off rehearsals and things at that point. There's some pictures on the inside of It's Alive. There's a little one of me, like looks like I'm worshipping Dee Dee. There's me in there. Yeah. I've got my brand new leather on, and I pogoed all the way through the evening in a really hot environment, and there's water just pouring down the inside of my leather. You can't see that from the photo.
No.
I'm over describing it. But I had really long, very gingery hair, and there you can see me. Dee Dee's jumped up in the air, and he's got his two legs splayed out like that, and I'm down front going, how much I can do. But oh God, Dee Dee. So I'm on there, and they threw out the little versions of Gabba Gabba, and it's got Happy New Year on the back. I had one of those. I ended up donating it on permanent loan to the Ramones Museum. Okay. So there's a little bit in the Ramones Museum to this day that it's a neurotics section, because we covered two of their songs. Okay. And also done a thing with Action Packed and Rockaway Beach, done backing vocals on that. So there's a bit of a Ramones thing going on there, and also. The Ramones were pretty much non-political, and I took Blitzkrieg Bob and done. It's about cruise missiles, about the US hosting England hosting US cruise missiles in Britain. Pardon me. And I made that point, but twisted it. I've done it in a sort of like cretin line, in the same sort of simplistic lines that the Ramones use on Blitzkrieg Bob. I've done a similar sort of style, but talked about cruise missiles. The Ramones come over to Britain to tour, and a friend of mine interviewed them for his university magazine. He said, what do you think of the Newtown Neurotics Blitzkrieg Bob? I said, we think it's great, really good. So that was the point. Next thing I know, the Ramones started to weave politics into their simplistic lyrics. Bonzo Goes to Pittsburgh and things like that. There was, instead of it just being nonsensical or something where you want to provoke,
Yeah.
by having some sort of German connection or whatever. The Nazi, yes I am. They used to do it in the early days. Instead of doing that, they're actually presenting leftist ideas. Even though Johnny was still a right winger, Joey was a left winger, and then this politics came into the music.
Yeah.
And I pointed out to the Ramones Museum. I said, make of it what you will, but this is what happened.
Yeah.
And they liked what we'd done to that number, and then what weaving the politics into the cretin sort of strand. They done a similar thing, a bit more sophisticated further down the line.
Yeah.
They presented politics in the way that you'd expect the Ramones to do it. It was perfect.
Yeah.
So the Ramones Museum saw that was a thread that was interesting. So the Neurotics got a little bit in the Ramones Museum. Showed where the influence went.
So you found yourself a drummer and played your first gig in Harlow?
Yeah, no. There's nowhere to play in Harlow at that point. No, we ended up playing in a village hall about 30 miles outside of Harlow, because someone knew someone who could drum. Right. It had to be 30 miles outside of Harlow, which is, that's how desperate things were.
Yeah.
But we got put on this gig, and we were supporting a band who had a drummer. They were called the Team Beats.
Okay.
It's not a team band. They were all gnarly old hippies, but it was great comedy.
Yeah.
They were a comic band, actually.
Okay.
And the drummer, he looked like, at the time, he looked like Joe Strummer. And he used to he'd be like the one cracking all the jokes, a bit like Keith Moon in a sense. It was a great band. We got to support them at our first gig, and he said, I said, well, we'll do it, but without a drummer. It's a bit naff, but it's punk, no drummer. So what? We'll do it. And he goes, no, well, you don't have to. I'll come down to a few rehearsals, and I'll do the drumming. So I'll be on with you earlier on in the evening, and I'll do my band after that. So he come down and played with us. He looked great. He looked like Joe Strummer on drums. Hey, what a combination! And he looked great. He played as much as his style was perfect. And we would have liked to continue with him, but we lived too far away from each other, and he was like into his band, and so it wasn't going to happen. But we played our first gig, and it went down really, really well. I was so scared, but I always remember that Because the Night by Patti Smith come on, and it sort of bolstered me up spiritually, lifted me, and that was a song that played before we took the stage. So that sort of strengthened me a bit, and then we went on and we started playing. And the funny thing about it was not having any, skills in that, developed skills at that time, was that halfway through the set I dropped my plectrum, and then was playing to get through the song, and I took several layers of skin off my knuckle, and the guitar just had this spray of blood all over it. This is the most punk thing you could ever do on your first gig. The guitar was completely covered in my Les Paul was completely covered in blood, and it looked great, and it went down really well. And then feedback from people who we've known for many years, including the people who've done the PA, who've done a lot of PAs in those times. Their feedback was like really good. So we thought we've got to do this again. And that. But it's a long. Our drummer. We done the promoter of the gig that evening was a drummer. So the first thing we've learned about him was we said, "We got any money?" He said no. And then he said, "Oh, by the way, you was asking if if there was a drummer around, I'll drum for you. And we said, yeah, okay. So the guy who wouldn't pay us for a gig was the guy who became our drummer for a couple of years.
Yeah.
So that's how we kicked off. And of course, it led to the first single, which he was on.
But was that self-financed?
Yeah.
Yeah. How did that do about? Because it wasn't so easy doing a record independently in.
It was worse than hard. It was worse than hard.
Yeah.
It was, because a key thing happened when we tried to put it out.
Okay.
We paid we made the recording. We'd done all that.
Yeah.
And we paid the money for manufacturing.
Yeah.
We picked. Pressing plant, agreed on that, paid, and got the money off.
There was one in Essex at that point.
Lake
was in
I
Essex.
can't remember. I can't remember it was now, but the money had come from our drummer's, Tiggy's dad,
right?
And it was counted out onto the table to the exact pound.
Yeah.
So we paid for it. And that is the point where Thatcher come into power.
1979.
Yeah, and she raised VAT overnight. And the next thing we know, we couldn't get hold of our single.
Yeah.
Said, you're not getting it until you've paid us more money.
Yeah.
And we said, we paid you all the money. You told us it was cost this amount. We paid it to you.
Yeah.
That's a financial transaction.
Yeah.
That we've made. And they said, it doesn't work like that. VAT has gone on from midnight last night on anything.
But if you place the order the day before, then that's when you paid.
Retrospective.
So, yeah, you can't do it. You can't do it.
Well, that's what they did. They wouldn't allow us to have it until we paid that.
Yeah.
So from that point on, we hated the Tories, even though we didn't know much about them in those days.
Yeah. That
was our line in the sand.
Yeah.
You got in the way of us getting our records.
Yeah.
That was 1979.
So you made it, but you've then got to sell them. How did that?
Distribution.
You got distribution, or
we had distribution through Pinnacle.
Pinnacle, okay, yeah.
And then we went down and badgered John Peel, or badgered him by giving him a record. We didn't badger him in any way, but we said this is a record we've made, and if you like it, could you play it? And he said, yeah, fine. And I turned around the rest of the day and said, it's going in the bin, isn't it? And they said, yeah, probably will. But he didn't.
Yeah.
And and then he started playing. Not immediately, not that night. I think it was probably a week later.
Yeah.
But he's sort of he's got a part of things. He's probably got there that he needs to work his way through. But he put it in to be played.
Yeah.
And just when we were given up, because we were like, he's going to play it. If he's going to play it, be tonight. No. We didn't understand those sort of things. So we all got excited that he might hear something, and then nothing. And then we gave up. And then when he did get played, it just knocked the stuff in out of us. We just really was an experience that's impossible to describe. Because after listening to people's records on the radio for all those years, and then you find that you can string a tune together, and then it goes out, and one of the most influential broadcasters on the BBC likes it and plays it.
Yeah.
You can't beat that. You just cannot beat it. And the thing is, it occurred while we were talking. We're a band of shouters. We shout over everything at each other, and we're all shouting at once about something funny. And Tiggy was laughing, and Colin was laughing, and I was shouting and laughing. I can't remember what we were talking about. I was just thinking, what's that sound? I was thinking someone's playing a tape of us because we just rehearsed. Yeah. Someone's playing a tape of us. Is that Tiggy's sister has recorded us while we've been playing? I said, shush. Right, and everyone shushed. It was coming out the fucking radio.
Yeah.
We had John Peel in the background in the kitchen, and it was like just, we was, as I say, we'd been rehearsing. We was all full of vim and vigour and sort of like being expressive because you're not really listening. And all of a sudden there we were.
Yeah.
And then this sudden impression come to me of radio waves going out from London and then to every corner of the UK and then to Europe.
Yeah.
The enormity of getting that airplay, because from such a highly respected DJ, you know, people were all tuning into John Peel.
Yeah, of course.
Europe, United States, where they could pick it up if they managed to pick it up. And he went out on the World Service as well, and he played the Neurotics on the World Service, so it just went global. We were just absolutely gobsmacked.
Yeah. The next single was the one that I first became aware of you.
Yeah.
When the oil runs out. That was self-financed again through Pinnacle.
No, self-financed and we gave it to Peel. I mean, basically it's about the oil crisis in 1972, 73. And Peel was playing it, and also Dave Rodigan. Irish DJ.
Not Rodigan.
No, it's not Rodigan. David. Oh, forgive me. I'm not very good with names. It's a long time ago.
David Jensen.
No. It's in Northern Irish. Southern Irish.
Right. Okay.
DJ. I can't remember his name. He started playing it, so we was getting a lot of Irish airplay as well when the oil runs out, and managed to pick him up one night on it's sort of like Radio Luxembourg type thing where it's fading in and out. Like he was playing it. He'd let us know when he was playing it, and then we'd tune in quite late at night. So all that was happening. Yeah. We got a lot of airplay on it, and then we couldn't work out why we weren't selling any records. Yeah. And turned out they'd been, you know, they were still sitting in the warehouse. It hadn't been distributed at all. Yeah. And so it was what you could loosely describe as a bit of a turntable hit. We didn't sell any, but we were playing it all the time. Yeah. I mean, it made a difference as a songwriter through publishing. That was good. But it didn't really do what we wanted it to do.
But you got some press, didn't you?
Oh yeah. In fact, what happened?
That was it. Sorry, that was important at that time to get into sounds or to get into the NME.
Yes, it did do that, and it got reviewed in all the major music press. And the funny thing is that afterwards, when we done Kick Out the Tories, and all of a sudden there was quite a bit of a spotlight shine upon us. We re-released When the Oil Runs Out and sold them all. Yeah. So after the fact, it went out, and we managed to do the business with them. But we are talking about distribution or nothing. Yeah. We couldn't get any gigs. One, because there wasn't a gig structure that we connected with yet. We didn't know promoters. We didn't know how to get a gig in London. Yeah. None of that. Yeah. We didn't have a venue in our hometown. Yeah. So the idea of occasionally we'd play a gig and we'd sell a few copies. It's very, very tiny amounts though. But we were selling them in distribution. So when the oil runs out, when the distributors just left them standing in their warehouse, which we went and picked them up from afterwards. Okay. And as I say, we sold them all in the end with someone else who never went back to them again. There was no chance of us sort of selling those at gigs. We just didn't have enough gigs. We really didn't play very often at all. Yeah. And we were, the early gigs for the Neurotics were structured in such a way that our following would we talk to a load of the friends in the pub a week or two beforehand, tell them about the gig and get them to commit to come or buy raffle tickets, which would encompass entry fee, and they would take that money and hire a minibus.
Right.
So our early gigs were our own fans hiring minibuses to be able to get to what tended to be village halls out on the outskirts in the dark. With no facilities or a small village in there, so everything was transported. The PA, the band, the followers, all were a little unit that would decamp at some sort of village hall and we'd play. And occasionally someone would say, "Why don't you come along?" and we'd get some new faces. But it was very much what we termed the Harlow front line, who were down the front every gig that we played and could always be relied on to be there. They were a raucous bunch, and they spent most of the time actually sounding like they didn't support us at all. But they were always there. You know, they were all anti this, anti that, and forever telling us not to sell out or else and things like that, and complaining if we played too much in tune on any particular night. You know, it wasn't quite as radical as they wanted it to be, but they were great, and they really sort of gave us we could be sure of an audience in the early days, despite the fact that we had no idea about promotion. There's no social media in those days. When we done a gig and we were able to get to wherever it was we were playing easily, we would make a load of paste up from flour and go and paste photocopied pictures up. That was the only self promotion that we could manage to do. Oh, and we used to write into the music press and get it in the tour guide. We did that. But when we managed to get a London gig, we'd turn up and nobody would be there. Right. You know, virtually apart from the front line, our crew. So it was good that they were there, but we were thinking, how does this thing work? Because actually we need an audience, and we need to begin with a London audience because it's nearest city to us. And we come down to London and play, and nobody turns up. So how the hell do we get people to turn up? And that is the most difficult thing for any new band.
Of course.
To get that recognition. Once John Peel started playing our stuff, then he invited us to do a session. So we done a session for John Peel, and then our name was spreading, and then we got connected to the music press with Sounds at the NME, Gary Bushra at Sounds, and whoever was feeling benevolent at the time to us in the NME. Later on, Christine from the Redskins, he started writing for them. Stephen Wells started writing for them. Got single of the week in the NME from Stephen Wells. So then the name started getting around, and then we got onto tours. We did a tour with the Test Tube Babies, and we went all round. We went all round the country in a coach that had previously been hired by Kajagoogoo and still had it on the sides of the windows, and we left it on. And we went round from city to city with loads of teenage girls running along behind the back of the bus, thinking it was Kajagoogoo. We had so much fun with that. It was unbelievable.
But you had John Opposition, your friend from Harlow. He started writing for Sounds and did a well-known piece in the NME about Newtown.
That's right. That actually was that kicked off the next stage of the Neurotics, because we'd got to the point where we were finding that we were going, that we weren't developing as much as we'd like to with Tiggy, and he was also a long way away from where we lived, and there was problems with he had some issues with his drinking habits, and also he had allergies on his fingers that made it almost impossible to drum sometimes. So it was like he had his off days and on days. It wasn't consistent. So we said we needed to have a change. So we told him that his services were no longer wanted, but we had to look out for someone else. And in the middle of our auditions for drummers, Attila got this piece that he was doing on Newtowns,
Yeah.
and he said you need to be in it.
82, the beginning of 82.
Yeah, I think.
May, something like that.
And I think it was. And we said, well, we haven't got a drummer. Yeah, we haven't got a drummer yet. A replacement drummer. It's going to look silly with the two of us there.
Yeah.
So we said, I'll tell you what, we're just the drummer we're about to get into to play with us, to audition. We'll put him in there anyway. I don't think he'd actually done the audition at that point, or if he had, we went on to audition him second time to be sure.
Yeah.
So it might have been in between auditions, but the first we hadn't committed to him on the first one because he could barely play the drums on the first one.
Right.
The first audition.
Yeah.
When we auditioned the second time, he'd been at it in a period of a week or two so much,
right,
and improved so much.
Yeah.
I said to Colin, that's all I need.
Yeah.
His improvement from the first audition to the second, this being punk and everything, we'll take him as he is, he can earn on the job.
Yeah.
In the meantime, we hadn't committed to him, but we brought him along to sit in as a member of the band anyway. And if we didn't choose him, it was a third person.
Yeah.
So he appeared in the NME with us, and then after that was published, we auditioned him the second time, and then we committed to it. Next thing we know, we're on tour, and within 2 months or something, he was in the studio with us, so he had to fucking learn quick. Really, really quick.
So was this before you signed to CNT?
Yes.
So how did the CNT deal come about?
The CNT deal came about because we'd done a demo in a guy who lived in a studio that was in a big a big thatched house with a barn. He built a studio in there. He was caretaker. He was a caretaker for the property until extra land was bought up for Stansted.
Yeah.
So that the building and everything was going to be knocked down, and he had a few years in between they initially going through the process of buying the land and that, where they let him live there on peppercorn rent, and then when the expansion went ahead, everything was bulldozed. So we went in there and recorded a few numbers in there, one of which was Kick Out the Tories.
Right.
And we'd been playing the night before, I believe, and then we went into the studio to do this thing, and our lack of experience meant that we didn't give enough time between the gig and the recording to rest.
Yeah.
I screamed my head off till I was hoarse the night before, and then expected to go in to record Kick Out the Tories. Yeah. So I couldn't sing properly.
Yeah.
So we go, let's kick out the Tories, and it was like my vocal cords were cracking all over the place, and some notes I couldn't pitch properly because I couldn't make it. I thought, well, listen to it afterwards. Fucking hell, it's awful. It's really fucking awful. Yeah. So, but we sort of decided that someone said to us, we're putting together a compilation cassette of various tracks. Have you got anything that you can add to it? So I said to the boys that we've only got this. It's fucking awful, but I suppose it's got spirit. And they said, yeah, all right, put it in. That's our first drama.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I sent it to them, and they released this cassette fanzine with these tracks on it, and then that got sent down to Gary Bushell at Sounds, and the first track on that release, Militant Entertainment, it was called,
Yeah.
release. It's worth quite a bit now. Was us. So Bush will put it in, press play, it's clear the story, like that. And he went, I like it.
Yeah.
This is my interpretation of it. I wasn't there at the time. I like it. This is good. It's the best fucking track on the whole thing.
Yeah.
It pisses over everything else, which the rest was a load of twee left wingers, shoegazers and things.
Yeah, yeah.
He said, yeah, I think this is great. And he reviewed it in sounds. That review was picked up by CNT Records.
Okay.
So CNT said, we'd like to do a single with you. We'd like Kick Out the Tories. You've got something else you can go on there? He said, yeah, Mindless Violence. I said, great. And I said, so should we send them to thee? Because we did do Mindless Violence at this session. It wasn't very good though, but too slow. But anyway, I said, we've got 2 tracks for it. Yeah. He goes, no, I don't want the tracks. We're going to put you in the studio and record them properly.
Yeah.
Right? Brilliant. So that's when, between recording that and recording the single, we changed drummers.
Yeah.
But
that's also what a lot of people don't know about. That's an ownership thing as well. If they've paid for the recording sessions, they own the recording.
That's it. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, that's true. And so we recorded it.
Yeah.
And they were recording the Redskins at the same time. We both got a deal with CNT Records at the same time, and then Chris Moore and myself would met up for the first time in a cutting studio in Tottenham Court Road, and they were doing that. They were cutting their lead bronze single, and we were doing Kick Out the Tories. So our paths met at that point, and it was and it's been supervised by John Langford, and so that was made. And then the funny thing is when it went to Bushell to review, he said, it's great, it's not as good as the original though. The one I was screaming my tonsils out of, almost landing my tonsils out on the table in front of us. That's the one he liked. He liked the raw edge of that.
Yeah.
But of course we'd had rest, we had a new drummer, and I wanted to articulate the song in a more sophisticated way, just screaming the top of my head. Yeah.
But it was quite a powerful statement at that time, because things were getting politicalised and punk was breaking up into little strands with the anarcho-punk, oi music, UK 82 scene, the hardcore scene. So, you know, you were coming out with a strong political message.
Yeah. This is the thing, right? This is the reality of it all. When we decided to do, what happened was I decided that we had a gig. We're going backwards in time now to the first drummer, Tiggy. We were offered a gig in Triad Bishop Stortford. That's where we played. That's the nearest we could play to Harlow,
Right.
Because we had no venue in Harlow, as we have not now. Well, we have. We do have a little venue that puts on bands occasionally, so it's probably a little better in Harlow now than it used to be. But we got invited to be the musical entertainment for the TUC doing a demonstration in the town centre, out in the open, on a stage. Yeah. And we said, we'll be up for that, because any gig that we could possibly get, we'd do. There was a leading up. There was a time when there was serious attempts at getting us to play in Holloway Jail. It never come off, but we would play anywhere. We actually played a benefit for knackered horses. Ada Cole stables would do anything just to play. Yeah, and in fact we done one gig at a wedding reception, and the whole of the wedding reception ended up in a fist fight, and then we were told to go away. Yeah. So there was some really difficult times to begin with, trying to get to play. But anyway, we took. I thought, well, we'd do this TUC demonstration in the town centre. I really ought to have something that chimed in with the occasion, and I had a song that we'd played at the Tried and Bishop Stortford gig that we'd got earlier. It was the late in the year previous. They did a gig on Christmas Eve, and they wanted a load of punk bands to do a Christmas Eve gig.
Yeah.
So we did that. So at the time, I chucked some chords together quite quickly, and then wrote some ad hoc lyrics for the evening, because I wanted it to chime in with the evening. So it was a load of nonsense going like, I had another lager, had another lager, I had another Marlborough, then another lager, then another Marlborough. Let's go, happy Christmas and happy New Year. Something like that.
Yeah.
Just do for the night, which it did for the night. And we were really drunk when we played, so it was an awful cacophony.
Yeah.
So I thought, I'll take that and I'll write some new lyrics for this Christmas song, but instead it'll be about the Tories. And the demonstration was called Kick Out the Tories.
Yeah, right, yeah.
So I called it Kick Out the Tories, and quickly wrote a few lines for that particular gig. And I wrote it because I take a long time over lyrics. I spend a lot of time over music and lyrics. Really, really pernickety. But on that occasion, because it had to be done quickly, I just threw them together. So I chucked words and chords together, and then we played it that day out in the open air. And it went down really well. And that was it.
Yeah.
Not to be played again. Because it was like, it's not befitting of the band, because I spent no time at all on it.
Yeah,
Throwaway is the term.
Yeah.
But we sort of like start getting our own material together and was playing that, and our little frontline following went, kick out the Tories. Oh, I might as well do it again. So, kick out the Tories. But I mean, I swear to God, I had no idea that I would be playing it 40 years later and playing it all the way through those years, and the significance that it would gather around it. The only thing I'd done from the original on the day was I mentioned Thatcher in it.
Right, yeah.
When we started playing it again, because it didn't matter to me in the first place, I come back to the lyrics again and thought, is there anything in this that I can fine tune instead of it just being something that was throwaway?
Yeah.
And I thought, the Tories, if they get out, they'll be in again at some point. So take Thatcher out of it.
Yeah.
Keep it non-specific.
Yeah.
And at that point, the song become applicable all through these years.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of the punk singles, everyone had an anti-Thatcher song, and it was literally anti-Thatcher.
Yeah.
Thatcher this, Thatcher that. They mentioned her, and I thought the Tories are despicable, and they're despicable whoever leads them. Yeah. So I'll take the name.
It's an ideology.
Yeah. Attack the ideology, not the leader.
Yeah.
And then that's made it applicable all the way through the years. When Tony Blair got in, we were playing it still because people wanted it, and I felt uncomfortable about it, and it turned out that the way it was interpreted by most people was that Tony Blair was no more or no less than another Tory.
Yeah.
So it fitted in. Yeah. And some people actually thought I was singing, let's kick out that Tory, the ruler of this land.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like, oh, okay, if that's what you think I sung, then why not? Because I like misinterpretation.
Yeah.
I do it all the time.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's funny.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think, why didn't they say that? It would be much better than that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a misappropriation of the lyric, but it suited me down to the ground.
So the fourth single was the ultimate song about living in a new town.
Not quite. No, 2 more singles in between.
Okay, was there? Okay.
Yeah.
But how did that come about? Because you took the members' music. What was you thinking behind that?
I'd got it's quite a long time ago now, but I think what the sequence of events was we needed to fill our set list out. We didn't have enough songs at the time, and I had found a sort of tendency to take other people's songs and remap them for myself. I can't remember when I first started thinking about repurposing other people's songs. I thought, initially probably I didn't do it right at the beginning because I thought it was dishonest or wasn't valid as a thing, and then we sort of done it on and off because we done Flaming Groovies and changed it into instead of Take Some Action, Take Strike Action. We done the Ramones, Blitzkrieg Bop. We done a slight one with Stand By Me, only by a middle line that changed on that. But the it became a thing that we did. But I think it was kicked off by the members' song because I sort of worked out how to play it, and I thought, we could do this members' song. I think the intention was to do Solitary Confinement.
Right. Yeah.
And when I was putting the chord together, I found myself just going, could be change it to Newtown. That'd be that. Yeah, change it to Newtown. Yeah. So I went into it a bit more, and then I was thinking, solitary confinement. I was harking back to this demonstration that we'd done when Kick Out the Tories was born, and I thought, okay, unemployment, living with Arnie, solitary, living with Arnie, right? Okay, yeah, that works. And then I went into the verses. Once I'd found the anchor for it, I went into the verses, started changing them, and then we found that it was quite a good chord structure to elongate, which we hadn't done. We might have done. We had one called "Get on Your Nerves." We still elongate that, but we hadn't really elongated anything really at that time. And so we thought this is good. So. And then it became a firm favourite of ours. And when we committed it to vinyl, we checked out the publishing of it, and we the thing is, it's you can change lyrics, but you can't get part of the publishing.
No.
If I change the lyrics and it's mega successful, then the members will benefit from that. But I can't change it. I said, fair enough, I just want to do it. If they earn off it, that's fine. So that was all hunky-dory, and as it turned out, it was a really popular number of ours. It became centre point, or the end point of our set on many gigs. And over the years we found that JC Carroll loved it. He really loved it. So he come and see us play the Fulham Greyhound. He said, "You made an old man very happy." But Nicky Tesco didn't fucking like it.
Okay.
Because it's his bits that got jettisoned. See
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
The lyricist obviously was never gonna sit very comfortably with him. And he was sort of like of the opinion, why don't they go off and write some songs of their own? Why do they have to muck up ours? But
that brings people to attention of their song.
Oh, definitely.
It all
helps.
Theirs would have come out in '79, I would have said, and yours, because I've just checked, was 86.
86, yeah.
You know, so that's
Yeah,
kind
it's
of
quite a while.
Yeah, but that's introducing a new audience to the members.
Yeah, absolutely. And the only, one of the irritating aspects of that is that as the members after we'd released that and the members were going around playing different places, that had people shout for living with unemployment instead of solitary confinement, which irritated the hell out of them. Yeah. But at one point, JC said to me, we really ought to do a version of living with unemployment, seeing as you've done solitary confinement. I think it was a fancy rather than a reality. But I said, you go ahead and do it. That'd be great. He hasn't. But he stands head and shoulders with another great name who said they'd do a version of one of our songs and didn't. It's Dead Kennedys. Okay. Jello Biafra. Oh, yeah. When the oil runs out, it was an all-time favourite of his. And he said, the Kennedys should do a version of it sometime. I said, go on, do it. But didn't. So, yeah.
So you kind of like, when I saw you live once, which we've spoken about, which was 1983, the Leeds Christmas on Earth punk festival. And from memory, you were the most powerful band at that event. Bearing in mind I'd seen the other bands quite a few times. But you got a big sound out from being a three-piece. It was a very big sound for a big hall. It was a big hall. But how did you get that power?
I can't really say. I mean, it's built in. I think that once we got Simon Lohman on drums, we really felt our potential. Yeah. And then if you're a three piece, you can't sort of meander around with things. It has a built-in tendency to need to be direct. Yeah. Because you can't go into a guitar solo. It just doesn't work. You can't do any finesse. What you got to do, what can you do in a three piece if you can't do finesse? Yeah. You could do power, anger, and heartfelt intentions. Yeah. Those two go together, or three things go together to be a pretty powerful thing. And our reputation was growing because of that directness, and we were, we'd found ourselves really, because Colin and I, grew up together playing music. Colin hadn't played an instrument before he picked up the bass to play with us, so we grew together. And then Simon was so early on in his musical ability that he grew then with the two of us, and it was sort of a homegrown musical knit. The three of us. We suddenly found ourselves. We all three found ourselves musically, and for a direction for our lives, because that's what the main thing for all three of us is. It gave us a focus and a direction that made life worth living, that we could hang all the other shit off of, shit like having to try and earn a living on, or trying to make bad things right, trying to put your point of view across, and just general life. We had, if we had shit to work through in our lives, we had the neurotics there to help us do it. Yeah, it's really important. And then that was the focus of the direction that our life would take from that point on. It's like anybody at a certain age. When you look back over the years from when you was whatever, there is a certain point everybody can identify that everything changed after that thing occurred, or that meeting. And for us it was like that. Punk happening just at that point in time meant that we were destined to have a completely different future than if it hadn't happened. It would have been radically different. And I certainly was completely, I was lost. I didn't know, I had no purpose. I couldn't really see any work that I wanted to do. I was low skilled. I had dyslexia. I couldn't see anything that I could ever turn my hand to that was anything other than low paid grind. So at a point where my life looked like it was presenting only misery to me, punk happened and gave me a future. It's quite a remarkable thing.
And also, because I grew up in a new town, you had to find your own entertainment. There wasn't venues certainly in Livingston, which is where I grew up. So I suppose the band was your entertainment.
Yeah, it was. And the other thing is, funny thing about it is, it's because there was no other alternative entertainment, and a lot of other young people found that soul destroying.
Yeah.
I too found it soul destroying, but I had an outlet for it. I mean, there was a lot of people who resorted to glue stiffing because there wasn't anything else in Harlow, and I had a very anti-Harlow attitude during those days. But as the years went by, we almost moved to the Netherlands as a band, so that we could be in Europe and not have to keep coming over on the channel. We could be in the centre of the European rock network. We never quite did it, and I wanted to get out of Harlow, and then I found myself with that dissipating. And over the years, I'm doing, still having the Neurotics, we're doing other stuff as well. The band, the town got more interesting, got things started happening that you could do in the evening, and then we got the square, the magnificent square that we based ourselves in as a catalyst from what we did. And that went on for years, and I turned almost like a Stockholm syndrome, ended up loving the thing that had taken me hostage in the first place. And I felt so estranged. I ended up really finding a lot that I could get out of the town in these days. So there has been a tendency for people to want to know about new towns when they talk to me, and I've got a broad experience of that now. And we've got a Newtown song on Beggars Can Be Choosers, our first album, and we've got a Newtown song, Take Your Dirty Hands Off Our Town, on our album that our latest album. So there's a thread that goes on through there, and I've also written a book called Newtown People. No, sorry, it isn't. It's called Newtown Pioneers. Sorry. But I haven't published it. I'm just sitting gathering dust at the moment. I mean, I've just sort of I made sure that I didn't die before I'd finished the book, because it was sitting around 3/4 finished for a long time. Just as I thought that I was an author, the band reactivated and I didn't have time for it. So then I pushed myself to finish it just in case I should die. And I couldn't bear the thought of the book not being completed. Once I finished it, I went, that's great, and then put it back into the cupboard again. I'm not inclined to do anything with it at the moment, but if it comes down to a point where I'm not doing Neurotics anymore, I might say, right, tidy it up and then put it around publishers. But it's got a lot of Newtown. It actually describes what Harlow started off being, what it meant to the people that moved into it. It's about my childhood. Not really music. I need to do one about the band at some point as well, but I haven't done that yet. But it was. It's all about. It's a faction book, and I've written about Harlow and all of the different aspects of it and my life in it, and where my memory no longer serves me. I've invented a fiction part of it. So it's a mixture of fiction. Basically, what you're meant to do is you're meant to get involved with the story that I tell, and as you go along, you get insight into what Harlow was meant to do. So it's sort of like, I've seen books on Harlow, they're really dry. They are really boring.
Yeah.
And it's got an interesting tale to tell,
Yeah.
but it has to be done within the construct of something else. So it's a story and a tale of dysfunction and stuff in my family, but it's also, it describes what it's like.
Yeah.
You've said some of the similar things that have been today about Livingston. It's sort of like being, having nothing worth living for, and you feel, and you're in a new town which is meant to offer you the future.
Yeah.
The future cannot be delivered immediately.
Yeah.
You have to wait for it to catch up.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
but I feel absolutely wretched now.
Yeah.
That's the gulf between the idea and the reality. And that's what the book's about. But it's sort of a mad tumble of fantasy in places.
Yeah.
And things. Really terrible book to actually be able to aim at an audience. Because it's so many different things.
Yeah.
So it's probably, I don't know. Like anything, I don't have to do it. I don't have to write. It's got some weird poetry in it as well.
Yeah.
I don't have to write the way that I'm supposed to write. I don't know how you're supposed to write. I don't want to know.
There is no right and wrong.
No. All I wanted to
creation.
do is just express what I've gone through, and I'll do it. And I don't know what its potential will be like, but it will certainly be. It's an unusual book. And it sits in between being a document of what Harlow, the ideas that made Harlow, and also the ideas that made me an adult. Because a lot of it I write in the viewpoint of me as a little boy, and then if it made sense. Anyway, I'll go on for ages for that, better not.
Couple more things. One is you've got a documentary coming out September.
Yes.
Tell us a bit about that. It's obviously about the Newtown Neurotics.
It's sort of about the path that we've spoken about today that I've been through. But on top of all of that, it's got the history of left-wing politics and the battles that we had with ideas in the 80s, either with fascists attacking us, or we're attacking verbally Tories or musically Tories. It's about the just by chance happening that punk happened when it did for me. And it, as we've spoken about it today, but it starts off with how that catalyst appeared. It's almost like something is offered to you, and it's like if you don't take this, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. And you're not even sure you're able to do anything with the thing that's being offered to you, but you take a chance. So punk happened. I decided to put aside any embarrassment I might have of barely being able to play guitar and start a band and play in front of people. And I didn't really know whether I could be a front man. I didn't know if I could be a guitarist. I didn't know if I could be a songwriter. I didn't know if I could be a musician. And and for many, many years, I didn't know when I could say I was a musician. It didn't feel like it at the beginning. I didn't know. You're not taking an exam where you get a bit of paper saying you're now a musician, which you can do, of course, now. But that, in those days, it's like, when do I become a musician and not someone who's bashing 6 strings and opening sound comes out? Somewhere along the line, I looked back at what I'd done and I thought, I think I'm a musician now. I can't remember when that was. But at the time that punk happened, I happened. And I was never the same again after that. And so it was really important to me to to take what I learned from that and make use of it. So you see that in the film. You see the strikes and the rioting and all the other stuff going on that happened in the 80s, and how we weaved our way through that, how our story is weaved into that. And then you see that, you know, the band start getting recognition, and 3/4 of the way into it, that's when COVID struck.
Yeah.
So 3/4 of the way into it, it went a bit further and did some more stuff, and then so much happened in COVID that we had to draw it back in again to make sense of the story to now.
Yeah.
So it's got a new end to it. And it talks about the challenges and the ideas that we were putting across, and it's got a lot of people, famous and non-famous people, who give their impressions of what the band meant to them, how we come across to them when they first saw us, and why they what, as you say earlier, how 3 people could come across so powerfully.
Yeah, yeah.
And Phil Jupiter says exactly what you said. He said, for 3 people, I said, I just could not understand how powerful they were for 3 people.
Yeah, yeah.
He says that, innit?
Yeah, yeah. You were powerful, you know. You were 40 years ago. It was an everlasting memory of a day. It was, you know, that you were the band that stood out on that day for me, and of my friends as well.
And I, as I said to you earlier, I've had more feedback about that gig than any other gig I've played in my life.
Yeah.
And it happens all the time.
Yeah.
I meet new people. Say, I saw you at Leeds at that huge cavern of a venue.
Bus station.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was there before it opened up, and it was just this vast hall, it was just empty, you know, and it was just like, and then obviously saw it when it was filled up a bit later.
They said there's so many people that were really knocked out by our set, and for me, the challenge was there for me to stand in front of so many people in that huge place.
Yeah.
There's no nuance that can come through on that. It's not. It's the sort of gig you need big screens up with camera on you to see it properly.
These days.
So the only way that I could, that I felt that we could get the band across is to just be as powerful and as direct and as good as we could do in that cacophony.
Yeah.
Because even the sound was atrocious.
Yeah, it was.
Not because the sound for us, ours might have been a bit better, but in the main, the largest stage, the sound just got lost in the hall.
Yeah.
So we had to really, really fight to get across what we wanted to get across. And at the end of it, we wasn't entirely sure we had. Yeah. Because all we could say was, it felt like a great gig, weird venue. It felt good.
Yeah.
We done as best as we could, so we were happy with that.
Yeah.
But the feedback, whatever feedback we got on the day, we must have got some, but I don't ever remember coming away thinking everybody was really really keyed into what we were doing.
Yeah.
But the feedback come over the years.
Yeah.
Loads and loads of different people said, what a gig that was.
Yeah, it was brilliant. It was really good.
So I'm really pleased about that, to get that. It's great to be alive long enough to get the feedback from people such as yourself all those years back from there, But it's great. Yeah, that's turned out to me, for me to understand that was quite a pivotal gig for us in that area of the country. Because we tried to get up there as much as we could in those days.
Yeah.
They tended to be pretty small gigs and things, but on that one, we were in front of more people probably than we had done in that part of the country.
Yeah.
We struggled to get to Scotland, and we never did till quite recently. But that's sort of northern-ish that we managed to get. And then of course we saw a lot of the people who come to that wouldn't have seen us down south at any time. So this was their one, not their one chance, but this is their first chance to actually see us play live. we obviously pulled it off, and people come away thinking great bang, and that helped us a lot after that. Yeah.
So 43 years down the line, what will we do when the oil runs out?
Well, there's a thing. Funnily enough, if it does run out, it's because we won't be pulling it out of the ground anymore.
Yeah.
And if that's happening, then we might have a future on this planet. This is the thing. So when the oil runs out, is actually a decision we make, as it turns out, because the original single was about the oil crisis in the 70s when the Saudis turned the tap off. That was a political decision they made, and it threw the whole of the Western economy into deep recession. Now, that's a long time ago, and it might, the question that should have come out of that was that our society is dependent on this raw material, and just this raw material. If someone could switch a tap off like that and destroy our economies, why? What are we going to do?
What's the backup?
What's the backup? And the reason why it was 3 Days of the Condor was a film that asked that question. With Robert Redford in, and it was because of that film that my ideas come together about when the oil runs out. And the thing is, it's a question that we should have been asking ourselves all the way down the line. I mean, in those days, it didn't have solar power or anything, but it was being talked about in the 70s. Hippies, those Californian hippies that had their heads in possible futures were talking about this sort of thing. But, to the terrorism that has followed through the shenanigans that Britain and the US and many other countries for that matter have taken place to wrestle the oil supply to their influence. The country that's going to be the biggest country and the most powerful nation on earth is going to be the one that has the most oil. That's the reality of it. And because we all addicted to oil, completely addicted, and if it stops, we stop. So, with that in mind, from that point on, after the oil crisis, we should have been making sure we never have to rely on these despots, because we have to sidle up to them and deal with dictators just so that we can make sure that the oil doesn't get switched off to us, that the price per barrel is sufficient for us not to descend into recession or depression. And so, what we're going to do when the oil runs out, if it was to stop, not through running out, but if it was switched off by the OPEC countries, the Saudis, what are you going to do? Now we're talking about, we know one thing we shouldn't do is be using more oil. And yet, there is solar power and wind power, all these green technologies that, with enough investment in them, could completely remove the need to pander to the Saudis or invade countries like Iraq to get hold of the oil. All the power we need is above us on our head, and in wind, and other green technologies, and the solar energy, and the amount of roofs there are in this country, you get solar panels onto every possible roof that can make the most of it. You'd have more power than we need from oil now, and loads more. In fact, it would with enough investment to kick it off. It would cost nothing to do, because the more people that had them on their roofs and the more free electricity come through, the whole lot would be a zero-sum game. There would be no investment really needed. It would pay for itself in micro pennies. So that's what we should do when we decide the oil should run out, because it's our decision now, because they found plenty more since those days of the 70s, and they even think it'd be a good idea to rip up the substrata of the ground underneath Blackpool and places for fracking to get shit oil out. You know, this is something that needs to stop. And there's not just what I say and what other people say. There is an absolute need for us to have what this country needs as a nation is a punk moment that I had in 1977, 78. A single incident that changes everything for the better. And I think that is for alternative energy and alternative ways of structuring how we work and what we do with work and how we fund our universities, our schools, our health service. All of those things need to happen, and in fact it can happen by something that's not written on the side of a bus. It'd be something with a commitment to investment into green technologies, which will then pay for themselves, and then our balance of payments don't have to be buying expensive oil from the Saudis, and we get to breathe unpolluted air and have a future and a weather system that's more reliable than we've got at the moment. So there is my solution. This is what I have learned from all those years. And although it has happened, it wasn't a conscious thought of mine to write a song called When the Oil Runs Out, and then at the other end of our career to write a song called Climate Emergency. I didn't really... It's a natural thing. It's not like I've been involved in green technologies all my life. I haven't. But I've got an ear open to what happens around me, and I watch what's going on around me. The OPEC oil crisis at one end, the financial crisis, COVID related mayhem that this country's had to, or the world has had to try and navigate through, and still have an economy at the other end of it. You know, all of those things obviously are going to feed into what I write about, and that's where it is. And I can't, there are certain things that happen around me I simply can't write about, because you can pontificate on how many angels you can balance on a pinhead. You can do poetry with it, which is fine, but it isn't me. You know what I mean? I don't do that. I do more direct stuff. But it isn't. But I think there is some eloquence within what I write. It's not. It does what it says on the tin. Kick Out the Tories does, and we sometimes get misunderstood. People don't look far enough into our material and think that we're a shouty band of slogans. You couldn't be further from the truth. That is something we do. We do lots of other different types of approaches into our music and our songs. Loads. And I've that was a one-off. It was a throwaway song. That's why it's shouty. And every other song I've written since then has been not throwaway, and I've taken a lot of time and effort over it. I am not trying to diss it. I am more than happy that people love that song, even though it was throwaway to begin with. I'm just happy that they're into that song, and then that was a gateway to listen to the rest of our stuff. And I'd be eternally grateful for both punk and that Chance gig which spawned Kick Out Tories. They're all great moments, and it was a great moment that I could say happened in my town and not in a venue outside of it. Do you know what I mean? We didn't have a venue, but as soon as they said we're going to do this demonstration, we'd like you to play on a stage outside, that's a venue in the town. We're certainly going to do that.
Steve Drewett, Newtown Neurotics, thank you very much.
It was a pleasure, mate.
Thank you.
Thank you.